Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our shirim on the light of David HaMelech, where we are trying to cultivate an understanding of the place of Malchus within the self, what it means to be a human being who is present within reality, not the contemplation of the ideals of Chachma, Bina, and Das, not the encounter with emotions or feelings and Chesed, Gevur, and Tiferes, not even oriented towards the action orientation in this world, which is Netzachot and Yesod, but rather to be in the pure presence of what it means to be a human being, the abiding nature of things, how things are when we encounter reality itself. That's Malchus. And while meaning is cultivated across the three stages of development in the mind, in the feelings, and in the preparation towards action, when it comes to Malchus, when it comes to the ground, when it comes to externalization or reality taking shape, it's much more difficult, nearly impossible, to allow the original ideal to find its way in the point of reality. Ideals exist above. They exist in transcendental spaces that are safe and free from the conditions of reality. But the real conditions of reality, the Malchus itself, that's a place of something real, not ideal. And so when a person finds themselves in Malchus, when a person realizes, when they wake up and they open their eyes, and we can say Moda'ani, and wherever I am, I find myself again, I return back to Malchus. Bezos Yavo Aron El Kodesh. Every time that I regain consciousness of myself, that I remember that I am a soul in a body and not just a body, that I am in the world at this moment and that I have free will and that I have the ability to choose how I would like to think about this moment or to treat myself or to treat other people. Every time a person's mind returns back to this place, this innermost place of Malchus, there's a coming to again, there's a waking up and realization that, wow, the matter is dependent upon me. I'm the one who's going to decide how I experience this moment. Because on a certain level, the experience of Malchus is like David HaMelech announces, Ki avi ve'imi azavuni v'ha'ashem ya'aspeini. That avi ve'imi, my father and my mother, that's my chachma and my bina. That's my wisdom and the embodied wisdom that gets translated through the emotional territory of a felt sense of being. And then it extends itself down into the practicality of being in this world. All of those things are identified as avi ve'imi, my father and my mother, my moichen, my consciousness, the ideas that I base myself upon. But there's a certain point when a person is engaged with this world itself in a place of malchus, which is leis lemagar klum, which has nothing of its own, which means to say that it is no longer aware of the light that is coming down to it at every moment from above, but rather it feels isolated, it feels alone, it feels like it doesn't have anything to stand upon, it feels impoverished and destitute. It recognizes that leis lemagar miklum, that I have nothing of my own and I am destitution itself. I am prayer. I am the cry that comes out from the place of deficiency and need. When the soul becomes aware of that face-to-face encounter with the self, of the Nitzitz Eloki, the divine spark that's in exile within this world, resting within the core of the self, so even though Avi V'izi Azavuni, even though I lost my mother and my father, I lost my moich and I lost my consciousness, but nevertheless Hashem Ya'aspeini, there's a certain light that is uncovered at the bottom when all of the previous levels of light fail to make their way down there. That has the possibility of illuminating the space in a way that is far greater than any of the other lights that were previously kindled. When those previous lights of Abba Ve'ima, of Chachma and Bina, of reasonable attention to this world, when those depart from me, in spite of the fact that I find myself in this existential quandary of being in the world without orientation, left or right, without knowing how to free myself from it, in that place there's an uncovering of a light, the light of the Hashem Ya'aspeini, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and He delivers me, He restores me back to myself. That as long as I was relying upon the wisdom or the understanding or the bina or the emotions to dictate my course in life, so that I've been dependent on something external and non-essential. But it's only when those external casings and non-essential elements of self dissolve and they fall away because of whatever circumstance there might be, that what is revealed is the irreducible kernel of self, which is the Nakuda of Malchus in this world, life on the ground itself. As David HaMelech said, he was the secret of Afar, he was the secret of the dust that is the source of all things, that bareness of reality, that externalization of the world to the degree that it feels hard or soft or warm or cold, or light or dark, where the person themselves is reacting to real things, things that at their very core are not real in the way that we conceive reality to be, but at all appearances and from all vantage points, Malchus appears to be reality. It's something hard, it's something thick, it's something that we encounter, and it's something that evokes a certain response from within the self, a physical response, an emotional response, a spiritual response. And so we find ourselves at the bottom of Malchus, we find ourselves in the world of Dovid, destitute and alone without the illumination from above. And the question is, what are we meant to do here? Now that we're here, so far away from the original starting point of Kesser, and we're actually at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the lowest place that it can go, which is Malchus. So the question is, what now? What now? And this was really what motivated Avram Avinu. This was what awoke in the path of Avraham from the bottom to begin to look upwards and say, okay, I'm here in this Malchus, I'm here in this world. The Mabul happened. Migdal Bavel happened. A two-tiered trauma takes shape. And here I am, the remainder of it all, that which remains. And the question is, what am I supposed to do? Ma. What now? Avram Avinu asks, Ma. Ever Ma. The expression of Avram in his essence is the ability to say, what now, Hashem? And we see this quality in Dovid HaMelech as well. Dovid HaMelech in the book of Tehillim gives us this strength. Avram Avinu revealed it at the outset of the development of Yiddishkeit and Judaism. But Dovid HaMelech takes this quality of Avram Avinu, and he says this is something that's going to be fundamentally necessary for all of Klal Yisrael, for each and every one of us when we find ourselves in a place of Malchus, to stand up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, what, Ma, how is this, what is this, where are you? How are you to be found here? What would you like me to do with this place that I find myself in? How am I meant to turn the world over? How am I meant to reveal the light of being in the world? Each and every person is called to task like Avram Avinu to receive that call of Lech Lecha, to move from Malchus itself and to move upwards. And the first thing is what, Hashem? How am I supposed to go forth from here? What do you want me to do in this world? And so we can learn from Avram Avinu and we can learn from Dovid HaMelech exactly what we need to be doing. One of the most important things for us to be doing, if not the most important thing for us to be doing. And it's something that is very heavy today. And it's an idea that is present in Klal Yisrael. It's always been there, but in more ways than we've had to face it in the past. And it's the question of compassion and mercy. Compassion, rachamim, on other people. Rachamim on the other. Compassion and the ability to find a point of unity between two opposing sides, the ability to see beyond the appearances and the differences that separate one person from the other. And those separations ultimately lead to agitation, and agitation leads to frustration, and frustration leads to infighting and anger, et cetera, et cetera. The question of racham and the question of compassion and empathy is, how do I uncover the singular core of self which is shared across the spectrum of human beings? Not to get caught up on the differences, not to get caught up on the silliness, not to get caught up on the insanity and the shigaon that different sides carry with themselves, but rather to be able to see through the thickness and the stuckness and to gaze directly at that point of unity, that empathic point of joining, where I can see that in spite of differences, I'm with that other person. With rachamim, with compassion, the world becomes a hospitable place. Without compassion, the world is a jungle. Avram Avinu came along and introduced hospitality to the world, the openness to host another person in spite of the fact that they appear different from me, or they hold themselves to be different, or they have no room in their minds for me. Nevertheless, that does not free a person from the responsibility of rachamim, of mercy and compassion. Now, Avram Avinu represents chesed. Avram Avinu is the ability to say yes to the world without any considerations. Echad haya Avram. Avram didn't have to ask, how do I grapple with this person's silly opinion? Or how do I grapple with this person's inability to see beyond the 4 feet of their own mind? Or how can I break free from this person's egos, etc., etc. Avram didn't have to grapple with that. Avram had a singular mission. He had to spread the light of God. But Avram Avinu also quickly learned a lesson that if I'm going to spread the light of God in this world, if I'm going to spread unity and achdus in this world, if I'm going to reveal the ever-present infinite light of Hashem to a world that has been darkened over in doubled forms of trauma, then I can't ignore the world. I have to take the world into consideration, because if a person ignores the world and just tries to spread light like Avram Avinu did originally, so they made a lot of Bali Tshuva, they brought a lot of light into the world, but it doesn't last, it dissipates, because it didn't take into consideration the reality of the other, the blockages that the other is experiencing. So in order for Avram Avinu's mission to truly be saved, in order for the light of Avram to truly emerge into reality in a lasting way, it has to move beyond the external nature of chesed, which is goodness without reason, which is just pure goodness without taking anybody else into consideration, just offering of myself without being bothered by other people. And he had to draw that chesed into a place of rachamim. Rachamim is a far more nuanced and mature encounter with what it means to be a human being in this world. It's not just goodness. It's the acknowledgement that sometimes there's opposition to goodness. Sometimes my perception of goodness might be pushed back against by somebody else's conception of goodness. And ultimately, everybody is stuck within their own micro and macro systems, within their own thinking patterns, and no one is deliberately coming along, hopefully, with an opinion just to fight the other person. But Rachamim enables me to take into consideration that because of differences in the world and because of different cultural and socioeconomic and micro and macro influences in a person's life, people will come to differences of opinions. People will come and find that the world is a splintered place very often. And when I'm aware of the fact that there are others, when I'm aware of the fact that there is a vantage point beyond my own, that doesn't mean that I'm coming to agree with the person that I disagree with. It just means that I'm able to understand and contextualize a little bit more of where their opinion is coming from. I'm able to look at them and realize that, just as I have come to the conclusions about the world, about self, about other, about God, about country, et cetera, through my own development and through my own study and through my own relationships and through my own being in this world, so too the other person has also come to their conclusions by way of experiences of their own. And even though that might not be enough to help me see the other person in a new light, what it does is it offers an opening for me to go one step further and realize that, wait a second, if just as I had to be a human being in this world and grapple with what I've grappled with and move through what I've moved through and encounter what I encounter and feel what I feel and experience what I experience, well, then just as that's true for me, it's true for the other person as well. And that underneath the ideological differences and underneath the separation, there is a shared human condition of nishmas Yisrael beguf, of being a human being, of a vehicle for God in this world, of trying to make light in a dark place. And when I'm able to see the shared humanity, the kernel of humanity at the core of the other person, it doesn't mean that I stop being frustrated. It doesn't mean that I stop disagreeing, but it does mean that I can understand them better. I can come to a place of compassion. Instead of being angry, I want to give the person a hug, because at the core of all of the miscommunication and at the core of all of the fighting and the grappling and the struggle and the stuckness is in truth just human beings trying to make reason out of a world. Human beings trying to find light in their lives. Human beings trying to the best of their ability to find a path for themselves in this world with Hashem. And so Avram Avinu understands that in order for the light of Chesed to come into the world, it has to mature and develop a real empathic frame. And this empathy is what we refer to as rachamim. It's the ability to see the other in spite of all of the differences, no matter how ugly those differences might be, no matter how unsavory and impossible to look at those differences might be, or how triggered I am by those differences. Nevertheless, to look towards the core, to look towards that which is most interior, and to see that nitzutz of a human being, and to come to realize that we're just all trying together, that each and every person is trying in their own way, and each and every person in their own individualized selves, when removed from systems that may manipulate, et cetera, is ultimately just trying their best, to find meaning in this world. And when we can own that fact that we too are just trying to find meaning in this world, we too are just trying to make it today, so then we're able to look at the other person who a moment ago was an enemy, a moment ago was somebody who made me want to destroy that world. And it can awaken compassion within me. It can awaken a love sickness, a yearning for this person to be healed, to be saved, to have help, to be offered comfort. Through the contextualization of the content of a person's experiences, we can come to understand why their content is the way that it is, and we can stop being so angry. because the anger is ultimately destructive to us. The anger is ultimately destructive to our own psyche. It destabilizes us. It puts me into another person's world, and I have no control there anyway. So the only thing I do is try and grasp at control by anger, resentment, frustration, and I'm poisoning myself that way. So rachamim, compassion, empathy, a shared sense of the human condition, which enables us to see beyond differentiation and to uncover the singular kernel of sameness that rests at all of us. That enables us to see beyond division. Dovid HaMelech says, Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good for everybody. That means each and every person's vantage point, when understood as their own vantage point and not as a fundamental truth, has the capacity of revealing a goodness that is reserved for everybody and revealing a singular principle of rachamim for everybody, that Hashem wants to be compassionate. Hashem wants us to be compassionate on one another in this world. That's what we're here to learn. How to make space for the other, how to grapple with the fact that, wow, there's something different than what I conceive of as being true, and that doesn't take away from the truth value of what I feel. It doesn't mean I have to destroy the other opinion. Truth is not a singular thing. Truth is an area, and it's a contextual frame rather than a particular point of content. Avram Avinu, the light of Chesed, this mission of Avram, this ability to reveal goodness wherever he wanted to reveal the light of God wherever he wanted to, it was under threat. It was thrown into the Kivshan Eish, it was thrown into the furnace. Because that light can't last very long in this world, because a light of uniformity, a light of a singular goodness is going to encounter restraints and preventions and blockages all along the path. And so the first test of Avram's light was that it had to be thrown into the Kivshan Ha'ish, and it had to be seen if it could emerge from there. And Chazal tell us that Avram Avinu's light was saved from the Kivshan Ha'ish in the merit of Yaakov Avinu, in the merit of his grandson Yaakov, who was not around yet, obviously. And so the pasuk in Yeshaya says, Beis Yaakov asher pada es Avraham, the house of Yaakov that redeemed Avraham. How could it be that Yaakov redeemed Avraham if from a time perspective they were totally separate from one another? So it means that in the schus of Yaakov Avinu coming into the world, Avram Avinu was saved. But the Baal HaTanya, at the end of Leiv HaTanya, at the secret of the empathic beating heart of Tanya, the Baal HaTanya reveals something over here. He says that this idea of Yaakov saving Avram from the Kivshan Ha'ish is not simply that it's the schus of Yaakov that means that Avram has to continue, but rather it's the midah of Yaakov that saves and redeems the midah of Avraham. The midah of Avraham is loving kindness, it's chesed, it's non-stop flow, it's extension beyond the self without any consideration being given to who I am giving to. I'm just being mispashet, I'm giving chesed, ki chesed, who I'm sharing. But it doesn't yet take into consideration the resistance of others who have differences of opinions, who seem to have such diametrically opposed worldviews. And in that place, in order to overcome the hatred, in order to overcome the sickness, in order to overcome the blockages that now separate one Jew from another Jew, what needs to be uncovered is the inner kernel of the midah of Yaakov, which is rachamim, which is compassion, which is empathy. Meaning to say that when love dies, when love can no longer extend itself beyond itself because the place in which I'm sending it is so ugly and I don't want to give it there anymore, I'm so disgusted by it, I can't find a shared space. So that means that love has died, that chesed no longer has the ability to extend itself outwards. But in order to revive love, in order to free love from the hatred, what needs to come along is rachamim. Yaakov Avinu has to save Avraham. This is the language of the Baal HaTanya. V'gam la'orer rachamim belibo aleha, ki hi bechinas galus b'toich hara me'sitra achra hagover aleha b'rishusa. That when a person encounters another Jew or another element of unsavoriness within ourselves, what we need to try and do, if we can't spark the hidden love, we have to awaken a deep compassion within our hearts on that spark of godliness that is hidden in exile within the negativity and the anger and the resentment that comes from the other side, that has strengthened over it and created an image of wickedness. And in the language of the Baal HaTanya, v'harachmanus mivateles hasina u'me'oreres ha'ahava kenoda. Kemo shekasav li'Yaakov asher pada es Avraham. That we know that Rahmanus, mercy, compassion, empathic joining with the human condition at the core of all individuals It negates hatred and it reawakens and resparks love, as is known that the Midah of Yaakov, which is the Midah of Rachamim, has the capacity of awakening the death of the Midah of Avraham. So Avram Avinu's path is only going to work if it awakens itself to the need for empathic awareness, and that sometimes all that we can do for another person is open up our tent. All that we can do for another person is offer them something to eat, offer them something to drink. Because more often than not, the ugliness that we see in others is symptomatic of basic needs that have not been met yet. Basic needs that have not been met yet. A person hasn't been embraced with a face of compassion and empathy. This reduces so much of the volume of the rage that the mind is sometimes buckling under, whether we know it or not. Because we walk around the world thinking that if people are in opposition to us, then the world is in opposition to us. And anyone who's in a state of opposition towards me, I can't do anything about it. So I grow resentful, and that resentment and that anger, it feels like I'm doing something by being angry and frustrated at that person. But in truth, that negative energy is taking shape within my own mind. But the moment that I'm able to look at that individual in the eyes and in an empathic way, join them and realize that, wow, you're a human being also. And you know what it means to be a human being. We all know what it means to be a human being. It's a hard thing sometimes. And with that awareness, we can have compassion on somebody else. We've spoken so often that the Rebbe, Rav Yerucham Levavitz of Mir, says that God created what appears to be a hospital. God created a world that appears, and Avram Avinu found himself in this world, a world that appears to be on fire, a world that sometimes appears to be antagonistic to its very self, that's at war with itself. And so Rav Yerucham, in line of his real Rebbeim, the Ramchal and the Gra, he asks the question, he says, why? God is infinite. God could do anything. Why is it that God wanted to create something that looks so schwer sometimes, with such disruption and such antagonism? And so Rav Yerucham says that the reason that Hashem created a world like this is so that we can learn how to have compassion on one another, that we can learn to look the other in the face and be melted by their face, to be held in abeyance by what can I do for you? That should be, on a certain level, the only response on the lip of a Jew when they see the face of another Yid. When we can see the creases of another Yid's struggle, the creases of another Yid's difficulty. The tzaddikim were able to look at the face and see all of its spiritual blemishes and strengths. We're able to look at the face and see a person's struggle. We can know that a person is struggling. And instead of being angry or upset or agitated because of the difference, I can dig deeper into that point of connectivity, and I can awaken that Ava Mesuteres, and I can be merachim on this person, and I can have Rahmanas on myself to not be angry with this person, and to awaken love and kindness and Rahmanas that says, here, how do we figure this out together? How do we figure this out together? This is the secret of Rachamim Rabim. Hashem is not going to bring redemption by way of din. Hashem is not going to destroy the world in order to bring redemption. Hashem is going to be empathic with us. Hashem is going to look at the human condition and he's going to say, wow, you deserve my compassion. If we're compassionate on others, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is compassionate on us. If we awaken ourselves to the needs of others and the shared experience of others and the baseline human condition that rests at the core of all ugly complications that descend afterwards, so then we awaken a certain mercifulness. We awaken a certain ease in which, in spite of all of the differences, in spite of all of the brokenness, nevertheless, there's a hidden light of Rachamim Rabim that's flowing through everything. And with Rachamim Rabim, Akaptzecha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings and gathers in his people when he sees that we have compassion on one another. Doesn't mean understanding one another even. It doesn't mean necessarily even being in conversation with ideas that are antithetical to our worldview, but it means having compassion, not losing sight of the human being, not losing sight on the nitzatz eloki shebekirbo, on that light of godliness that rests. Like the Heilige Noam HaMelech says that Adarabba, 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 it's the opposite of what we thought. Tein belibeinu shenira kol echad es malas chavereinu v'lo chesronam shenedaber kol echad b'chaveru b'derech hayasher v'haratzu lefanecha. That the way that we have to serve you, Hashem, in this world is by speaking good and affirming goodness in other yidden, and finding that nakud of rachamim rabim, of finding that place where I can be empathic on this person. What is it that might be going on in this person's life that has made them so broken, that has made them so difficult to deal with, that has made them so unsavory? What is it that has led to such a broken opinion? What is it that has led to such a space of constriction? But that question of what already awakens me to the fact that there's a story here, there's a narrative here. And if there's a narrative here, then the end result that's in front of me is not the end all be all, but rather this came from someplace. And that awakens mercy, it awakens compassion, and awakens a deep desire to sit with another Yid and to look them in the eyes and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry your life was like this. I'm sorry these are the things that you had to go through. I'm sorry this is how you were brought up. I'm sorry this was the world in which you cultivated your way of being in the world. All of the different angles through which we're able to have compassion on another person, wherever we find ourselves and however we find ourselves. Nothing that I'm saying is rooted in any particular perspective. It's applicable to each and every perspective, each and every person according to their own lane in this world, each and every person according to the conjecture of their own heart. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude needed to be mitzumsam. Why? Because Hashem wanted to reveal compassion. Hashem wants to have compassion on us. And the only way that we can awaken Hashem's compassion is if we can have compassion on others. Dovid HaMelech teaches us how to see our own human condition with eyes of compassion, not to run away from being human, but to celebrate being human and to utilize that nature of the human condition to say, Hashem, have compassion on me. Kedal va'ani ani. I have nothing. What do you expect from me? And when we're able to find compassion within ourselves, for ourselves, we can begin to find compassion for other people. And with compassion, with rachamim, all of the stones of the heart are crushed. All of the blockages that block the connectivity of Klal Yisrael fall away. In the face of rachamim rabim, in the face of compassion and joining the other individual, and seeing through all of the differentiation, and all of the separation, and all of the argumentation, and looking another Yid face to face, eye to eye, and saying, how can I help you? What can I do for you? How can I ease the burden? Compassion awakens love. We have to do this daily for ourselves, for others, for our children, for our loved ones, for Hashem, to realize that it doesn't have to feel like one singular flow of light. Sometimes there's interruptions, but those interruptions, those blockages are there to awaken a certain sense of compassion, of looking at the other person with eyes of Rahmanas, not judgment, but Rahmanas, that's saying, wow, being human is hard sometimes. How raya is that I know I'm human too. And then we can look, Isha Lachiv, we can look each other in the eyes, we can begin to understand how difference is part of the beautiful picture of Klal Yisrael and how all of the nastiness and ugliness typically comes from people in power rather than the goodness in the hearts of each and every individual. And even those in power are ultimately good individuals who have also been, manipulated, v'chule, v'chule. And we should be zoche to awaken rachamim. Rachamim is the same rachim is the osios of rechem, which is a womb. It's a place of pure potential and emergence. It's also the language of machar, which is tomorrow. That rachamim enables me to look at this given situation, this person in front of me, and instead of looking them as a final product, I can see their experience right now, just as I can look at my experience as a rechem, as a womb, a potential being that has a machar, that has something that's going to emerge tomorrow. Rachim, rechem, machar. And then we can take our chomer, then we can take our stuckness in the world and we can refine it and we can come to develop new tsuros, new ways of thinking. The whole goal in this world is to transform the chomer into the tsura. The chomer feels fundamentally separated because one way of chomer being revealed is different than another way of chomer being revealed. And in the realm of chumrius, so there appears to be no unity. But when we can reveal a tsura, a new form of looking at the chumrius, we can transform the ches, mem, resh of chomer, and transform it into a rechem, which is a womb, a place of possibility, which orients us to the recognition that there's a machar, there's a tomorrow, and that leads us to a place of compassion, rachamim rabim, and be'ezras Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should respond to our desire to awaken rachamim rabim and send down rachamim rabim as well. Again, to read finally the words of the Baal HaTanya. All of the concealment, all of the badness that we see in this world is ultimately just godliness in exile. It's light that has been condensed and hidden under all thickened forms of human experience and circumstance. But when a person awakens themselves to compassion and mercy and empathic joining and the shared acknowledgement of the human condition, so then it awakens the ability to let go of the toxic hatred, which does nothing but add stress. And it awakens within me the ability to begin to love again, to begin to have a new form of love, a new form of compassion that helps me relate to the world in a less antagonistic way. It allows me to feel safer in the world, allows me to try and develop a singular purpose of minimizing the burden of other people, of helping other people, of providing mercy for the other person so they can see themselves in a new light. Be'ezras Hashem.